Hi folks, welcome to our latest thought for the day. Well, it's Holy Week, that time when we focus on the build-up of the events of Good Friday and Easter. So here's the Gospel reading set for today. It's taken from Luke's Gospel, chapter 22, beginning to read at verse 54. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking him and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, "Prophesy, who hit you?" And they said many other insulting things to him. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. "If you are the Messiah," they said, "tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me, and if I asked you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." They all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He replied, "You say that I am." Then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Fear is a funny thing. Often we're encouraged not to be afraid, to take courage and dismiss the feelings of fear we are experiencing. But fear is part of who we are, part of how God made us. It's a vital mechanism for protecting ourselves when danger threatens. It triggers the adrenaline rush that switches on the fight or flight response, giving us that extra boost of energy and strength when real danger threatens. So fear is good and necessary, but at the same time it can paralyze us, make us focus on our fear rather than dealing with it, which is not good. And it can drive us to make some unusual choices about the things we do when faced with a threat. In today's reading, Peter, who just a short while earlier assured Jesus that he would never deny him, that he would follow him even to death, who when Jesus was arrested in Gethsemane took out his sword and cut off the servant's ear to defend Jesus, finds himself denying that he even knows him, let alone follows him. Sat watching Jesus held captive at the high priest's house, Peter is recognized 3 times as one of Jesus' disciples, but each time he denies even knowing him, each time getting more vehement in his denial. On the face of it, that doesn't seem very rational. At this time, there was no sense of the disciples being persecuted. Nobody was accusing him of anything other than knowing Jesus. How must he have felt? Obviously, he didn't suddenly stop loving Jesus. It seems as though fear for his own safety took over. Surely he must have realized what he was doing, that he was denying the one to whom he had pledged his life. But fear led him to saying things, doing things that were totally against his beliefs, against his values, against his very nature. Then we are told Jesus looked at him, and he seems to have been so overcome with guilt that he ran away and wept. I wonder what sort of look Jesus gave him. Was it a look of disappointment, a look of anger, a look of condemnation? We aren't told, but my sense is that it was none of these. It seems to me that it would have been a look of understanding, a look of love. Jesus knew Peter very well, knew how he would be struggling with what he had said and done, and had compassion for him. Jesus himself was fully human, so surely like any of us, he would know the feeling of fear. It was perhaps a sense of fear and trepidation that prompted Jesus' prayer in in Gethsemane, "Father, if you are willing to take this cup from me." However, in this he showed real courage, not an absence of fear, but continuing down the right path despite the fear, trusting that whatever happened, God would be with him and he could trust in him. "Nevertheless, your will, not mine, be done," he said. Jesus was later to express his understanding of Peter's fear when, on the beach, he reassured Peter by giving him 3 opportunities to express his love for Jesus, and Jesus commissioned him to be the shepherd for his flock after he had ascended. So fear need not be the last word in our lives, any more than it was with Jesus. We too can acknowledge the fear is being very real and justified, but nonetheless, taking whatever precautions we can, carry on with doing the right thing. It takes courage, but with God's help, we can do it. Just look at all the key workers in the NHS, care workers, teachers, refuse collectors, postmen, shop workers, and everybody like that who continue to expose themselves to the possibility of contracting the virus by simply getting on with their jobs, serving and caring for us as a community. Without their courage, the situation we face would be far worse, and they deserve our unstinting thanks and support for the work that they do. Obviously, the right thing for those at higher risk, the right thing to help limit transmission of this virus, is for most of us to stay at home, but for some, it is to continue with their vital work. Please keep them all in your prayers, and pray for our government too as they try to make the necessary resources available and lead the fight against this virus. As we close today, let's turn our thoughts back to Jesus and to his terrifying journey to the cross. For love of us, he set aside any fear and endured the shame and pain of ridicule, injustice, torture, and ultimately death for our sakes. As we reflect on our thoughts today and listen to this song, let's thank him for his unfailing love. God bless.
Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. And laid behind a stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders earth.